This is part two of the thrilling docudrama novel that will soon be turned into a movie. Of course, no, it won't. I'm, of course, joking. What the hell is this thing called? Women. What did I call it? Women love. Women should be in. Women should run the countries. Mostly men should run the economies, and 14 to 17-year-olds should get the vote. Judy said to John, "I love you, John. Please don't leave me." Oh, that's the wrong book. Just kidding. Okay, I'm going to lead off from where Obama was talking about how, well, I'll just say what he said. "Now, women, I just want you to know you are not perfect, but what I can say pretty indisputably is that you're better than us men. I'm absolutely confident that for 2 years, if every nation on earth was run by women, you would see a significant improvement across the board on just about everything, living standards and outcomes." When asked if he would ever consider going back into political leadership, he said he believed in leaders stepping aside when the time came. Quote, "If you look at the world and look at the problems, it's usually old people, usually old men, not getting out of the way," he said. "It is important for political leaders to try and remind themselves that you are there to do a job. But you are not there for life. You are not there in order to prop up your own sense of self-importance or your own power," unquote. Excuse me. And I agree with him 100%. Except I want to give women at least 20 years to prove themselves. Enough is enough. Women need to run our governments and our bureaucracies. I am not saying kick men out that are there. They can stay there until they quit or retire or are voted out, thrown out. But all new employees in the civil service and running for office should be women, numbers allowing. It was illegal for women to run for office for centuries. Time to make it illegal for men to newly run for office for a generation and see how things go. And it's not just the political side of things I'm referring to. I'm talking about all civil servants, federal police, federal full-time military personnel, not reservists and militia though, and the government-run healthcare system. Again, I'm not saying kick the men out, but I am saying that the only people, numbers permitting, that should be allowed to join any federal government department for at least 20 years must be female. By the way, what would a female technically be? A female would legally be someone with no male sexual organs, and she officially calls herself a woman. A man is anyone who either had at least one male sexual organ from birth, even if he lost them later to injury, cosmetic surgery, or illness. Or a person who was a woman and had all her sexual organs removed and declared herself a man. Let's start with the military. In peacetime, I believe it is essential for there to be peacetime soldiers with as little lust for combat violence as possible. They have to be as well trained as funding will allow, but they must have instincts for peace greater than instincts for war. Sure, they must be able to fight a war and fight it well, but they must not have strong inherent drives for combat. It should be something they wish to avoid, for they know combat means human failure. Excuse me. And I think female soldiers would generally display these qualities more so than male soldiers. Men currently in the full-time military can stay until they retire, but all new recruits, numbers allowing, must be women for at least 20 years. However, once combat begins, reserves might be required, and men do make excellent soldiers in terms of tactics and drive. So the reserves would allow both sexes. As for the police, I am sure there are lots of great male cops. But again, you want people as police whom have the least negative instincts to fight off to do their job properly. Someone who cannot be swayed to corruption due to sex or money or power. And women, though they can be corrupted, have far less base negative instincts than that can be corrupted. I think they just make better police officers in that they are less corruptible. As for male police officers now, same as above, male federal cops stay as long as they wish, but only women, if numbers allow, can enter the federal police force for at least 20 years. And then we will see how they do. And finally, the public medical field. I assume this is the field where the most people can agree that women have better instincts for medicine than most men do. I cannot prove this, but I guarantee you that more women get into medicine to help people than men do. That more women get, yeah. Again, the greater, wait a minute. Excuse me, that's fine. Again, the greater male instinct for power and greed gets in the way here more than it does for women. As for men already in public health care, same as above, men currently in the field can stay on until they retire. But new people entering the services must be women, numbers permitting, for at least 20 years. Once again, I'm not saying that women are better than men. They are not. Personally, I believe no one is better than anyone else. Compare Gandhi and Hitler. I honestly do not feel the former was better than the latter. I just think the latter was a heck of a lot more screwed up than the former. Or one was sane and extremely benevolent and intelligent, while the other was obviously intelligent but emotionally messed up and insane. But I still say neither was better than the other. Just incredibly different. And women are not better than men, but we men have all this caveman-style instinctive baggage that we have to carry around, that we have to often fight off from time to time. And the more unhappy we are, the more effort it takes for us to fight them off. If men could turn off their base instincts before they went to work every day, working in government, I would not be saying women are better suited, but right now they are. Now I'm saying these changes will make government Now, am I saying these changes will make government perfect or harmonious or free of corruption? Not in the slightest. But we are stuck with government, but it needs massive change. And so many things have been tried: monarchies, democracies, dictatorships, total male domination of politics, etc. And they have all brought us to this point, where politics of almost every country is a complete mess. Politicians are clearly not in the slightest bit interested, for the most part, in helping people, but only in helping themselves and or people they personally know and love. This COVID-19 worldwide overreaction must never happen again. Now, an all-female bureaucracy could end up doing the same thing, though I think the female version would be less guided by a lust for power and more guided by a desire to protect. And it would still be wrong. That is why sane human adults must be in control of our bodies, completely. And that control must be wrestled from government. And I see no way possible to get male politicians, powerful bureaucrats, to voluntarily give up that power. None. They got into politics for power. Why would they agree to give it up? Sure, they will make up ridiculous excuses why governments need the power, but they will be saying it almost exclusively for selfish reasons. I think with women in charge, they will have less selfish, base instincts to fight off, to agree to hand over the power they do not deserve. Plus, I think that female politicians, top bureaucrats, will more readily see, when the dust is settled, all the tremendous pain that the COVID-19 lockdowns have caused. They will more readily see how things went too far, and they will care more about making sure they do not go too far again. If humans ever want back the power over their own lives that they have given up to corrupt governments, it is essential that women run these governments, because men will simply never voluntarily give up the power that they crave so much. And I do not only want women in power because I think they will far more easily give up some of that power, their power. I also genuinely believe they will do a better job than men, on average, because they have so much more instinctive, they have so much less instinctive negative baggage to carry around. It's high time women were given a shot at the helm and be given enough time, a generation, 20 years, to prove themselves. And if they do, I think history will look back and wonder how humanity got along without them in charge for so long. And how can this be done? Simple. Ladies, never ever vote for a man again. I am a man saying, asking, telling, semi-pleading with you to never vote for a man again. There are more women than men. If all of you stop voting for men, you could have women dominating politics within 5 to 8 years. And when you get that power, you could then enact all the other things to get women to run the government completely. Also, if all women stop voting for men, men will give up running, as they will know they cannot win. This will make the changeover easier. Now, there would be a huge backlash from men anti-feminist women. So what? They are wrong. And what is wrong with giving women a chance for just one generation? That is all you are asking for. Tell them, whether you mean it or not, let us run the government for just one generation. And if things are not markedly better, we can go back to parity. Most people, men included, despise government now, have little faith in it. So what the F do they have to lose? However, this next part is key, and I will get into more detail later. But you must throw men a bone. You cannot just take away their political power and expect them to like it. You have to give them something in return. And that something is business. You have to promise them and put firm laws, regulations in place that makes government leave the economy alone. And I mean alone. Many of your instincts, ladies, will be to help people when they're in trouble. And that is a nice instinct, but it does not work in business. I will give more examples that should largely prove that in the free enterprise chapter. But just assume that I am correct here for now, that business must be free of government control. Men are better at business than women, with exceptions. We just are. And business is one of the few areas where many of our base negative instincts can be utilized for good. Greed, desire to control, desire for power, all of these things help in business. Business is not about being nice. It's about being cold and calculating. And letting market forces and economic boycotts force business people to learn to do the right thing, not laws, rules that can always be got around. You must leave men alone in business. I am not saying you cannot be in it all you wish. Of course you can. But you must allow men to run their companies as aggressively as they want, outside of fraud and environmental and maybe health and safety laws. Allow the motto, let the buyer beware, be the motto of your economy. Not, don't worry, if you make a little mistake, mommy and daddy government will make it all better. That is a recipe for massive debt and macroeconomic stagnation. And just try it that way for 20 years, a generation. If they're going to give up their political power for a generation, the least you can do is lay off their businesses for a generation. And let's see what happens. It's only fair. Excuse me. So if all this comes to pass, what do I think will happen in those circumstances? I think you will have governments that are much less corrupt and selfish and more concerned about better lives for their people. I think you will have governments that are much less corrupt and selfish and more concerned about better lives for their people, voters. I'm going to rephrase that. I think you will have governments that are much less corrupt and selfish while being more concerned about better lives for their people, voters. Yeah, that sounds better, I think. And you will have a free market economy that is growing very fast and generating lots of income for your citizens and improving their way of life. The female-run governments will look after those who need help, much better than governments do now. But the fast-growing economy will provide those governments with extra tax dollars to build solid infrastructure to keep the minimum standard of living high. Plus, I think there will be far less wars, international conflicts, and less general misery in the world. And if I'm wrong, we can just go back to the mess that it is now, or something in between. But let's give it a chance, for humanity's sake. And if you don't believe me, believe Barack Obama. It's time for women to run the countries of the world. And it's time for male politicians, bureaucrats, to go back to doing what men, we, do best. Make excremental loads of money. Not that I've made excremental loads of money, but I've done all right, more or less. Okay, that's one. Now, two, free speech. Free speech is an absolute right and cannot be stopped by the government in any way, unless the person in question is directly inciting illegal violence against another citizen of that country. This must be determined in open court before it can be acted against. My reason for listing this should be obvious, but in case it is not, I believe free speech is absolutely critical to a healthy democracy. And not just relatively free speech, but absolutely free speech. Now, threatening someone's life, especially if they live within your own country, should always be illegal. I'm fine with that limitation. And slander, libel are obviously actionable and should be. But lots of countries now have laws that say you cannot publicly utter your opinion on certain things. One example that comes to mind is to deny the Holocaust took place. Excuse me. Now, for the record, I definitely believe the Holocaust took place. But I strongly oppose people not being able to publicly state a belief that they do not think it took place. To me, that is crazy. So let's say you have a child who is raised in the country by a father who obviously wrongly believes that the Holocaust did not take place. So when that son grows up, that is what he believes. He is not anti-Semitic. He just does not believe the Holocaust took place. Now, if he states that publicly in many countries, he could go to jail, in some cases for many years. That is totally ridiculous. That someone can go to jail for more years for publicly denying a historical event that happened decades before they were ever born than someone else could get for rape. How on earth could someone with a decent brain and mental faculty claim that is just? And this opens the door to goodness knows what else is illegal to publicly deny. The existence of God, that Satanism is good, of course it is not. That the 9/11 attacks were a hoax, I do not believe they were a hoax, by the way. That such and such does not exist or such and such never happened. No, this is wrong. So long as someone is not physically threatening anyone or slandering, libeling someone, they should be able to believe anything they wish and state it publicly, including that there was no Holocaust, even though it is obviously wrong. Free speech must mean just that, freedom to say almost anything you wish and to believe anything you wish, no matter how offensive or erroneous it might be to others. Excuse me, that was 2. 3 is men of the big 6. 3 men and women that wish to must run the economy any way they see fit, outside of fraud, environmental, and possibly health and safety laws. No assistance, no limitations, no corrupt central banks, hire or fire anyone they wish for any reason they wish. No government bailouts ever. Free market economics must reign. The current economy is a near complete mess. Debt is out of control. The economy was barely growing much even before the COVID-19 paranoia set in. And the wealth gap is exploding, thanks to the central banks propping up their stock markets, which help the rich and almost no one else. And all this really started to go to pot around the time of the Great Recession. The Great Recession was the fault primarily of the governments and the central banks. Sure, the banks and consumers and insurance companies, institutions helped it, but they could not have done what they did without the politicians, central bankers, urging them onwards and not putting on the brakes until it was way too late. After the Great Recession began, instead of letting the economy fix itself, something that had been done countless times over hundreds of years and had worked out just fine, the world governments and especially the central banks decided to all go Keynesian at the same time. They decided to throw out fiscal responsibility and free market economics, and they would buy their way out of the Great Recession. And then they kept blathering on about how it worked for FDR and the New Deal during the Great